Welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures That Outperform. This week, we're continuing our conversation on AI governance. We're going to take a look at a governance framework. I'm here, of course, with my wonderful co-hosts, Terry Mays, who's absolutely incredible. I've got Mr. George Pace here, who's been doing AI much longer than most of us. And I'm Frank Warner, the founder of People Productive and Boardroom Edge. So today we continue our discussion on AI governance. So we'll get right into it here. Let's take a look. We always start with what we learn. This week it's a little bit different. We have something on more akin to what we experienced. We probably all had this moment at a different point in time. I had mine just about 6 weeks back. I mean, George, maybe you want to start this Captain Obvious moment?
Yeah. So, again, large language models, I've played with them, ChatGPT, Grok, pick your favorite. And it's one thing to play with these or experiment with these. But this past week, I've been working on some content for my consulting business. And as I got to the slides, there's about 15 of them in total. I won't go through all the painful details, but each one has a summary section. And what I basically did was I wordsmithed my initial thoughts as to what I wanted this to be. And I allowed Grok, which is the one I was using, to come back with, I basically prompted it to say, improve this sentence. And just going through that exercise, for as simplistic of an exercise as that was, I came out of the other end with that much more of an appreciation for how these things are going to become assistants or tools to what we do. Because the initial part of what I had was brainstorming, my own personal brainstorming. And rather than having to go through an individual I'm still going to go through a different review process. But as part of that initial process, I actually had like my digital self, in a sense, saying, no, George, you need to use this word, or you need to highlight it this way, or you should construct the sentence slightly differently. And it was just that much more meaningful that I had an actual example of something I'm working on, something with a very specific message, and watching something help me elevate that was just, it wasn't a surprise, but it was just so, it subtly changes the way you look at the tools. Say it that way.
Yeah, about 6 to 8 weeks ago, I had a similar experience. We were working as a team, three of us, updating a marketing piece for the sale of an enterprise B2B SaaS platform. And we took a crack at it, and then we got on the tool, and I'll tell you, it just accelerated the production of this piece, the quality of it, the wording, everything. I think it was really just amazing. And I had a similar Captain Obvious moment at that time. Not that I didn't think it was powerful, but boy, it was absolutely made a super difference.
Really does. Now, mind you, still had to go back and review it and check it. And I still tweaked even the responses coming back. But it just shows you how quickly you can get from your own ideation into something that's fairly well wordsmithed in a very short period of time.
Oh, it's a great productivity aid. There's no question about it.
Yeah. You can even ask it questions and just let it give you thoughts. Right. So if you're kind of stumped on a topic, you can just go there and ask ChatGPT a question.
That's actually gonna be part two, because I have the first half of it's done. I now have to get to the second half, and I'm gonna query it to help me tweak that. So good point.
Yeah. You can literally have a conversation and have it give you the talking points, and you're just right there in the midst of it.
Yeah.
With very little effort. It's really interesting. I find it interesting every time I give.
I'm amazed by it, even though I've been using it for a long time now.
Yeah, and it's fun. For some reason, I get a little giddy every time I get a response back, and I'm like, this is so cool.
Yeah, it is a breakthrough. But so how do you make a breakthrough then on governance? What do you have to do about governance in your company? Well, we put together basically as our as the second episode on this, really the beginnings of this framework. If you put enterprise governance models in place, I've done a few at different companies, these are the functions basically. And they're called mechanisms when they're really set up right, these governance mechanisms. And all of these may or may not exist depending on the size of your company. If it's a very small place, none of them exist, but there are people who are going to take on responsibilities or roles that would be doing this. You're not going to have a formal set of mechanisms because the place really isn't big enough, but you're going to have to do all of this and think about it. And so if you're a really small company, this is happening in a less formal way. If it's a larger enterprise, there is a formal set of governance mechanisms, maybe not as well thought out as in a company that's running really well, but you do have these. And we're going to just talk about a few of them. And I know, George, you want to pick one?
Well, the one I'm going to talk to is regulatory compliance, and the reason for this, and it's really systemic across all of these. But picture this as being the staple easy button for a second, where that top piece that says AI governance function, it's kind of like, okay, we put together a bunch of people, they're our governance function, press the easy button and it's done. And the reality of it is that the people running that function need to interact with all those people underneath. So if we just get down to regulatory compliance, the questions I would begin to ask are, who's doing that? Who's keeping track of it? Are they doing it as another piece of their job? Do they have the resources and time to do it? What's the deliverable that they're going to have? Are they going to be funded to do it? All of those, you could easily say, I'm going to bring a regulatory person in, but they have work that they're doing right now. So the question really becomes, as you look at each one of these pieces, and again, Terry and Frank are going to go through different aspects of another section, but the starting point to this is there's going to be a fair amount of work under the covers, and there is a quote unquote cost, either a seen cost or a cost in an individual's time to get that work done. And this is the part, this is kind of that separation of what somebody tells you need versus what is the cost and the actuality of implementing that particular function.
Yeah. And, if you take a look at like strategy and planning, I think most enterprises don't have a really good strategy planning function. They don't really work top down and bottom up. They don't gather all the information. They don't go back and ensure that there's alignment with the enterprise strategy or how it's going. But you have an existing function. You've got to weave AI into this across the enterprise. And so if that doesn't easily fold into what you're doing, then you're going to have to work on how you do strategy overall. And you got to get that right. But you've got to fit this in. You've got to, obviously, all the investments have to be taken into account in terms of that strategy and that plan. And this should fit right into the flow, and it should be an ongoing thing that's evolving. You need to be addressing these pieces every step of the way. Tara?
Yeah. And I think one of the most overlooked areas when it comes to governance is training. People automatically assume when you hear governance, it's almost like a dirty word. Oh, it's going to slow down the processes. We're not going to get anything done. Nobody's going to make decisions. But if you do governance well, it actually speeds the process up. Mm-hmm. So the way you do governance well is through training. Right. So you got to help people understand the why. They have to understand that, especially when it comes to AI, where you can have hallucinations and you can get absolute wrong answers from AI. You have to make sure that you're governing AI in your organization from an ethical perspective, right? So you want things to be fair. You want there to be some accountability, some transparency behind the scenes. How is this thing working? But then you also want to make sure that things are safe. And so when you kind of help people understand the why behind the governance through training and making sure that they understand that we're reducing risk. So this is all part of risk management. It helps people swallow that pill a little better. And then when they know that, it's not just one group's responsibility, but it's all of our responsibility. Everybody has to take some ownership in this so that we all stay compliant and we're all doing the things that we need to be doing and not just kind of running around focusing on the wrong things or finding loopholes so that we can bypass the governance.
Yeah, and I would say that every one of these areas should be thinking about their role in AI governance right now. And if it's an area that's an orphan and no one has that responsibility for thinking about that should be given to somebody. In smaller companies, that will be the case. Next week, we're going to talk about roles and responsibilities. What are the roles of the executives? What are the roles of the managers? How would you take a look at this and begin to divide it up? Because these responsibilities vary by level and different levels of the enterprise and different divisions handle different aspects of this. So we're going to start to tease this out as we go on week by week, so you could start to see how a real governance process or framework would unfold in your company.
Yep. The last thing I would add to that, Frank, and
Sure.
this is just from past experiences. But if you were a startup, as an example, or a small company, and you were beginning to implement this as a value add, and you had hopes at some point in time of quote unquote selling your company, if there's a merger and acquisition that happened, rest assured, the company that's going to acquire you or potentially purpose you is going to go through their own governance of reviewing your processes. And it's likely that if you're missing a major gap here, especially in the data space, that it may not value your company as highly as it should be valued, or worst case scenario, they simply walk away. So understand that this is not in a vacuum. It really is within an ecosystem. And this was in the open source days, this was a huge issue of companies that went in, they were vetted, and if they didn't use the right licenses, their companies didn't get the high valuation, or the acquirer walked away. So you have to really look at this from a big picture perspective.
Yeah, and clearly when companies are doing due diligence, they do go in and look at how well all of these things run, depending on how relevant they are to your company and the size of your company. And so all of this really does matter. We wanted to reiterate this, that great governance, we covered this last week, actually speeds things up. They're like brakes on a car. When you have a car, you can go faster because you have brakes. When you have great governance, what's allow you to long-term run well and build a sustainable enterprise. So this is very important. And so, if you're interested in any services to help you think through this, we can help you with AI governance. We can help you with engineering a culture where you can operate at level 4, which is innovative, and you can have a trust-based culture where people are willing to speak up and take responsibility. Strategy planning, we can help you lay that out so that it's working top down and bottom up. What kind of organizational design do you need to really get this done? If you're interested, you can reach out to coach@peopleproductive.com, and we'd be happy to help you. We like to always end with a parting funny. So if you take a look at this, it's Popeyes. Now, you might notice something. We've got white and black smoke. That might actually trigger something in your mind. George provided this funny. We were looking for something funny today. I thought this was really good. And so what do you see here? What does this mean?
And could this have been AI generated? I don't know.
Maybe it was. Yeah.
Maybe it was. I do not know.
Maybe it was. But somebody looked at Popeye and they read it differently, is what happened.
Yep. And it says either Pope yes or Pope no. So as we come up upon the new selection of the Pope, it's either going to be white smoke or black smoke. So
there you go.
It was to me, this was one of those cerebral things that was just. It
is funny.
It was cute. It was cute without being, silly, stupid. So.
And next week we're going to go into governance part 3. That was the beginning of roles and responsibilities. You can see the different mechanisms that exist that imply roles. How do those roles begin to break out across different levels of the enterprise? We'll talk about this. I hope you're enjoying the series. We're here every Wednesday at 3:00 Eastern with another show. So we hope you can join us.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.